Hey, Sojourn S2. Hey, it's great to be with you. My name is Mike Cosper. I'm one of the pastors here at Sojourn East, and I'm here today to talk about spiritual disciplines, which is one of my favorite topics. One of the ways I always like to think about the disciplines is that these are invitations from God, not obligations that we owe to God. These are ways that we experience God's presence, not ways that we earn His approval. And so, as we talk about spiritual disciplines throughout this series, I hope you'll see that this is an invitation to go more deep into your relationship with Jesus and to adopt some practices that can help reorient you to Jesus throughout your days. Specifically today, we're going to talk about fasting. And fasting is, at its most basic level, is to say, I'm going to take something that I love, and I'm going to lay it aside for a few days so that I can experience more intimately the presence of God. Most often this is done with food. We'll talk a little bit about other kinds of fasts in just a minute here. But for the most part, I want to talk about food fasts because traditionally that's the way the church has predominantly practiced their fasting. Why do we fast? Well, we fast because we want to remember that we rely on God for our provision. We rely on God for our food. We rely on God for all that we actually need. And so when we take food and we set it aside and we say, I'm gonna not eat for a couple of meals or more, we're saying, Lord, I remember that my provision comes from you and my joy comes from you. Fasting is a skill that you'll learn. It's something that you're going to practice hopefully throughout your life. You'll be able to lengthen your fasts the more you do them, and you'll be able to go more deeply into a fast with a better readiness to turn to God when hunger pangs come. So the big thing for you to hear today is that this is something to start simply with. Don't go into this and think, man, I'm going to do a 40-day fast, food and water. Like you're going to hurt yourself. So don't do that. Go into this with a simple expectation that I'm going to skip a meal. I'm going to skip a couple of meals. And as I experience hunger, I'm going to try to turn my heart to the Lord. So generally, you might want to start with picking a day, let's say next Thursday, and say I'm going to skip breakfast and I'm going to skip lunch, and then I'm going to enjoy dinner. During your fast, you want to drink lots of water. You want to make sure you stay hydrated. Some people during fasts, if they feel lightheaded or that sort of thing, you might want to drink a glass of orange juice or apple juice or something with a little bit of carbohydrates just to kind of keep you going. But the point is, the main point is to try to turn your heart. That when you feel hungry, when you feel lightheaded, turn your heart back to Jesus. So then what are we fasting for? Well, if we look in the scriptures, we can see all kinds of reasons that God called his people to fast. Sometimes it was for repentance. Sometimes it was for a season where they were in peril. If you look at the book of Esther, she calls on the people of God to fast when the lives of all of the Jews living in exile were imperiled. But it doesn't have to be that grandiose. You can fast simply because you want to grow more intimate with God. You can fast because you're praying for an answer to a specific prayer. You can fast because you're asking for God's provision, or you're asking for healing, or asking for the health of other people. There's no right answer for this. It's literally something that you can look at your life and say, where do I want to see God show up? I'm going to pray for that as I move forward. One of the things I want to encourage you to do is to sort of bookend your fast. So when you begin your fast, let's say we do this Thursday morning and lunch fast. Wednesday night, when you have your last meal, the last bite of food, take a moment and recognize, I'm stepping into fasting. Lord, I pray that you would meet me in this time over the next couple of days. And then whenever you break your fast, whether it's at lunch or dinner the next day, recognize that this is a joy, a provision, a gift that God has given you. And you've set it aside for a time, and now you get to enjoy it again. So be intentional as you enter in and as you exit your fast. One of the important things I think to know as well is that Jesus tells us explicitly that when we fast, we're not supposed to make a big deal out of our fasting. We're not supposed to broadcast to the world that we're fasting or how hard it is. See this in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 6. It says, "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." Fasting is a wonderful opportunity for us to have something that's literally just between us and God. It's a moment of intimacy where God knows you've given something up. The people around you don't have to. And in your fast, you're drawing nearer to Him and into an intimacy with Him. Let's talk for a moment about other kinds of fasts that you can do. Sometimes during Lent, people do long fasts where they say, I'm going to give up desserts, or I'm going to give up chocolate, or I'm going to give up coffee, or I'm going to give up video games, or I'm going to give up social media, or I'm going to give up Netflix, whatever the case may be. Those are great. And you can do those over a long period of time, and you can approach them much in the same way. But I'm talking specifically about food fasts because, again, this is just something that the church and that the people of Israel have practiced for a very long time. And it's a great skill to carry into the rest of your life. All of those kinds of fasts are great, and they're worth conspiring. But fasting on food is something that the church has historically done from its beginning, from its roots in the lives of the people of Israel. And it's something that you can grow in throughout your life in deepening and lengthening your fasts. That said, there's a couple of things that I think we need warnings about. One is weight loss. Some of you guys might hear this and think, oh man, I'm all about fasting because I need to lose 5 pounds. Well, that's not what this is about. First of all, if you try to lose weight that way, it's not good for you. It's actually going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And second of all, this is about cultivating intimacy, not about getting something out of it that's just for me. The second thing is you might be expecting spectacular results. You might think, man, if I fast, then God's going to answer my prayer. I'm going to have all this new intimacy. I'm going to have all this new energy to be with Him. And that's not likely going to be your experience, certainly not your first experience. Because fasting is something that we grow in, just like we grow in prayer, just like we grow in learning to study and meditate on the Bible, just as we practice any spiritual discipline. We'll get better at it as we go. But for our first experience of it, it's going to be like doing anything new for the first time. Doesn't mean that God won't meet you in it, doesn't mean it won't be meaningful, but be wary of hoping for spectacular results. To wrap things up, let me make a challenge to you that's very specific for the coming week. I want to challenge you to pick a day next week where you're going to fast. Make a decision to skip breakfast at the very least. Maybe skip breakfast and lunch. That's a decision for each of us, knowing kind of our own bodies, our own energy, what we need. Some of you are in sports. I understand this. So it could be different for each person. And then pray instead of eating and see what happens. Turn your heart to the Lord whenever you feel those hunger pains. Then, as with all these disciplines, doing it once is great, but let's do it again next week as well. And some of the other ways you've been challenged to practice the spiritual disciplines, we've had this metaphor of the difference between a speedboat and a sailboat and a raft. And what we want to be is like the sailboat that has our sails furled, looking for the ways that God is at work. And fasting is one way to sort of lay aside our normal desires and say, Lord, how are you at work? How can I pay more attention to you? And we pay more attention to Him by turning aside something else that we love. Thanks so much for listening. I'm eager to hear how you've tried this and what you've experienced. And then next week, you can try it again. Thanks.